Thank you, Danielji. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation, Danielji. Although you had invited me earlier also, about 3 to 4 months back, but due to some reason, the meeting could not be materialized. But somehow you remembered and you again invited me, and I'm very much thankful to you for giving me this opportunity to share my understanding on this topic of the power and use of thought. So what we will do is, first we will understand a little bit about the structure of thought. Now man, as we understand and look at ourselves, we find ourselves to be a human body through which we gather impressions and we do some action and speech. On the other hand, we have some emotions, likes, dislikes, desires, thoughts, and this we are unsure, most of us, whether this is part of our brain or is it something separate which we call our mind. So it is not clear, but for the theosophical student, it is very much clear, as well as the Sanatana Dharma, that the mind and brain are different, that the mind can be dissociated from the brain, that the mind and the physical body, they can exist separately. A lot of evidence has been gathered indirectly in this regard, in out-of-body experiences, in near-death experiences. Internet is full of that. In all different types of lands and cultures, different people have claimed this, that they have been out of their body and they have seen their body lying, yet their personality, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, they remain intact. Similarly with near-death experiences, when the heart is stopped, the person comes back and then he tells us that his personality was still intact, minus the physical body. So in this regard, the theosophical student is quite sure, as well as with his studies, that the mind is different from the brain. Brain being just a transmitter. So this mind, which we have, has certain components to it, functionally. So what do we find? We find that we are having likes, dislikes, desires, we have feelings, emotions, and we have thinking or thoughts. There is a slight distinction that we do in theosophy between likes and dislikes, emotions, and thinking part. The thinking part is like a computer. It's like when we add 2 and 2 together, we get 4. Whether we like this number 4 or not is immaterial. Our mind tells us that 2 and 2 have to become 4. That is the principle. That is the logic. So the logical part of the mind is called the thinking part of the mind, or what we call as thought. Whereas the other part of the mind in theosophy, we call it as desire part or the emotional part, and we denote it as the activity of the astral. Most of us, we know about this. So our mind is composed of emotion, the astral part, as well as it is composed of the thinking part. In the thinking part or the thought part, we have again 2 subcategories. One is the concrete part, where we can think in definite terms, like we think of the number 2, number 5, a particular table, a particular person, a particular object. Then we have a specific thought and a specific shape. So that is called the concrete part of the mind. Whereas when we have an idea which represents a general principle, and we call it as an abstract part of the mind or abstract thinking. So we have these 2 subdivisions. So now that we have, in a synopsis, we have the mind consisting of emotions, our likes and dislikes, our desires, our passions. The other part being the logical part of the mind, and in which we deal with concrete images, concrete thoughts, specific concepts, and the third part is the abstract part of the mind, where we deal with principles, laws, generalized concepts, like for example, a table or a triangle. Now these are concepts which are abstract. A triangle can be of different types, but it has general properties. So in that way, I think most of us, we know. I will not elaborate too much on that. Now, we also understand as theoretical students that one part of the mind affects the other part of the mind, and the mind as such affects the body, and the body also affects the mind. So if we have a strong emotion, it will affect our thinking. It will distort our thinking, as well as produce impact on our body as well. Same way, when we have a thought, it will affect the thinking part if it is related to ourselves, to our personal self, or it will have no impact if it is just a pure philosophical thought. So with this, let us go further. This was just a base so that if there are new people here, they can understand what exactly we're going to talk about further, so they're not confused about it. Now, as soon as a thought is produced, a vibration issues from that person from where the thought has been produced. It's like a stone being dropped into a pond or a lake, and ripples start coming out. These rippling or the vibrations which radiate from that person in whom the thought has occurred, they spread in all directions, and they affect and impact each and every person who comes in contact with us. Now let us understand a little bit more deeply about this. This thought can produce two types of radiations. One is a simple radiation, and the other one is a complex radiation. Just like in a musical instrument, we can press a key or just play along a single string or pluck a single string. You will have a single tone or a note. That single tone or a note will denote one type of frequency. Similarly, a thought which is just confined to a particular subject, for example, algebra or geometry, it will have a single type of frequency. Now, let us understand in terms of sound. When we speak, a sound wave is created. This wave is having frequency as well as it is having an amplitude. This amplitude determines the loudness of the voice or the sound. In the same way, a thought, how strong it is, how far it will go, how far this radiation will go, depends upon how strongly it was created, how much strength it has. But the character or the quality of this thought will be dependent upon the frequency of the thought. So if it is a thought of devotion, it will have a different frequency. If it is a thought of jealousy, it will have a different emotion, a different frequency. Similarly, in sound, we find that in women, the frequency is higher, but they can speak as loudly as a man whose voice frequency is lower. So this amplitude determines the strength, how far it will go. The frequency determines the quality. This thought, as it radiates from the mind of a person who has generated it, it carries on in all directions depending upon the strength of the thought, and it impacts everybody whoever comes in contact with this thought. If it is a single type of a thought, or if it is a complex type of a thought, it makes no difference on the radiation. Only thing is, if it is a complex kind of a thought, it will have multiple tones. Like in a song, we have multiple tones. So a song is made up of several tones, several sounds of frequencies, several frequencies combined together. So let's now take an example and understand it. A person is sitting in his house and doing some puja to his Ishtadevta, his deity, who happens to be Lord Krishna. And as he starts to develop this devotion within him, this devotional feeling, this devotional thought, it spreads around him in this radiation, all around. And it affects each and every person. So now it will have impact on three types of people. First type of person is a person who himself is passing by and is also a devotee of Lord Krishna. In such a person, when this thought will impact the mind of this person, let's suppose let's call this person who is developing this intense thought of devotion sitting in his home by the name of Krishna Das. So when Krishna Das develops this devotional thought, the thought carries forward and goes in all directions, all across the street and the park, maybe the whole city, depending on how much strong this thought was. A person who is also devotee of Krishna comes in contact with this thought. What happens in this person? A similar type of thought gets reproduced in this person, who is also a devotee of Krishna. Whereas in the second case, there is another person who believes in God, but is not a devotee of Krishna. Maybe he is a Christian, maybe he is a Mohammedan, maybe he is belonging to some other sect of Hinduism. In such a person, the devotion will be evoked, but that will be to his own Ishtadevta, to his own deity. So supposing somebody is a devotee of Lord Ram, then that person will feel devotional feelings arising within him of Lord Ram. Whereas in the case of a Christian, it may be Lord Jesus. In case of a Mohammedan Muslim, it would be Allah. So different people having different associations with different deities will have this kind of thought arise in them because of the impact of this external thought. Now there is a third category, the third type of person who is not believer of any God. He is an atheist. What will happen in him? That person will feel elated, feel slightly better, a little more joyous, a little bit more happier because of the impact of this thought. So we find that, number one, whenever a thought is produced, the thought will have its impact by radiation on different people who come into contact with this radiation, provided that these people are not otherwise engaged deeply in some other work. Their minds are not engaged in some other work. If supposing I am a devotee of Lord Krishna, but I am engaged in some heavy mental work, then this vibration coming from Krishna Das will come to me and pass away. It will strike my mental body, it will strike my mind, but it will pass away. And I will not be able to get any kind of image or any kind of devotional feeling. Just like when I am engrossed in some work and there is a sound nearby, I am unable to hear it. So we are traveling in a train, we are talking to somebody on the phone, and there's some people talking around us, unable to hear. Same thing. This radiating thought will only affect or produce an impact depending on whom the impact is being made, is engrossed in some other work or not. If the radiation of thought is sustained over a particular period of time, or is it constant? Supposing we are in a temple, in a Siddha place, where there is a constant radiation of some influence, and we happen to be there and being engrossed in something, then during this period when we are engrossed with some particular work, we will not be impacted by that radiation. But as soon as our mind settles and the mind becomes free, we will be impacted by this radiation. So in this way, we find that if we go to some good places where there are good influences, and if we stay for some time there and let our minds settle, we may benefit from such visits. So this is just an example. So this is the first thing which happens when a thought is created. We are going to understand the structure of thought. Unless we understand the structure of thought, we will not be able to develop power and make use of it. So this is the first part that we have understood, the radiation part of the thought. The second thing which happens when a thought is created is that it makes a form. A form is made in the mental world and this form has a definite shape and color. There are three classes of forms which are made when a single thought occurs. Let's understand the first class. The first class of form or thought form is made irrespective of who is making it. This form is the base, the way in which nature intended this form to be made. So for example, if I have, let's again take the example of Krishna Das. Krishna Das has a devotional feeling, and it is directed towards Lord Krishna, who is in front of him in the form of a picture. So this Krishna Das is producing a devotional feeling. The form created by this devotion, a specific form created for a specific deity, by this devotion will create a form of devotion which will be similar to the form created by a Christian who has devotional feeling towards Lord Christ. This form is the form of and how the nature responds, how the mental world responds. It is inherent. So let me just try to tell you this because it might be a little bit confusing for those who have not seen these pictures in our books. You see this is a vague affection. This is pure, this is from Thought Forms, a book by C.W. Leadbeater. So in pictorial form, he has tried to make us understand how a form appears on the mental plane, astral and mental plane. So this is vague affection, not specifically directed to somebody. This is affection which is having selfishness. You can see the darkish part. This is brown gray coming in there. So brown and gray, they represent selfishness. And the pink or the rose red, they depict affection. This is definite affection. It is going towards that entity towards which the affection has been created. Who is the object of that affection? So you can see this is irrespective of who is the object. If I have affection definite for somebody, the same type of thought will be created. This is the natural, the generic form in the mental world. We go further and see this is radiating affection. So supposing we have affection for everybody and we radiate it from ourselves, and this is how radiation happens. This is a protection form. So supposing somebody has a mother wants to send, has a feeling of protection, affection, wants to make the child safe because the child is going away somewhere. This kind of a form is made. Or when we purposefully make some forms, thoughts for protection, for protecting somebody, then these kind of thoughts, these kind of forms they are made. Now we can see further also. This is for devotion. So this is vague religious feeling. And the last I will show is this is the upward rush of devotion. Now, with this, we understand that these generic forms are made irrespective of who is creating them, and they are associated with color and shape. This is the first class of thought forms. Now, these thought forms, these first class of thought forms, they are made and they have three subdivisions in them. I will later on summarize this because it may get a little bit complex. So the first subdivision of these type of thought forms is that the form goes to that target to whom it is addressed. So supposing I'm thinking about some person. So let's suppose I am thinking about a person to whom I am sending a helpful thought of health. That person is sick, I want that person to become healthy. This thought form, which is created in my mind, will rush towards that person and impact the mental body, the mind of that person. If that person is engrossed mentally in some other work, then this form will wait near his mind till that person's mind becomes free. Just like a person comes to our house and rings a bell. If we are engrossed, we don't hear the bell, we will not open the door. But as soon as the mind becomes free and that person has similar matter in his mind which can vibrate to the same frequency of this thought form, then that person's mind will accept this form and take it and make it part of itself, just like we take food and we eat it. So that person will be affected, the mind of that person will be beneficially affected if it is a beneficial thought. If it is an evil thought, a thought to injure the other person, it will have similar impact. So in the same way, in the physical side, if we give a gift, we give a flower, a pen, something we give to another person, and the person accepts it, then the person gains by it. But if we slap a person or abuse a person, then obviously we are making an impact of the other side, of the other kind. So this is the first subclass of this generic thought form, in which a target is there and a person specifically targets or sends the thought, whether consciously or unconsciously, towards that person. And it has an impact. It only has an impact if the other person's mind can respond to the same frequency. This is important. Otherwise, what will happen is that this thought will strike that other person's mind, and if that same frequency is not present in that other person's mind, then this thought will come back and strike us back again. So if I have a negative thought, emotion, and I direct it towards some saintly person, some Mahatma, what will happen? The Mahatma does not have in his mind any such type, and we will find ourselves thinking again of the same things that we thought of earlier ourselves. So it's a loop. And this loop will keep on happening. And this is how we live our life. The third subclass of this type of generic thought form is when we don't think of anybody in particular. In the first type, we thought of somebody in particular. In the second type, we were thinking about ourselves, our affairs. In the third type, we don't think of anybody in particular. A thought is there. Today is very cloudy. It's a thought, nothing specific. So what happens to this? Another thought, I take out from my pocket some piece of paper and I don't find it very interesting and I just drop it. So wherever I drop it, it will remain there and I keep on walking. So as I move in this world, as we all live in this world and move from place to place, these kind of thoughts, which are not directed towards anyone, any person, or not related to our affairs, they don't go anywhere. They are just created wherever they are and they remain wherever they are. So it's a mass or a sea of such thoughts in the mental world through which we move. So when we go to a particular place, let's suppose we go to a metro station and we are waiting on the platform of that metro station. On that platform are again so many loose thoughts which are not directed towards anybody. And if our mind is also free, then these thoughts will come within our mind, and if we latch on to them, we may start a series of similar thoughts and go along with them. So these are the third class of subclass of thought forms of this type, which are generic thought forms. So we have dealt with one type of class of thought forms which have a specific shape and color, but they are determined by the nature around us. They have a specific shape and which we cannot influence. When we have affectionate thought for somebody, directed towards somebody, this type of form will always be created with this color. We can't influence it. We can't change it. This is how nature intended it to be. We can't do anything about it. Second type of thought form is when we think of ourselves in some place. So supposing I remember I was in Goa, or I was in some hill station, or I was near the sea somewhere, and I'm thinking about that place, and it is an actual place. Then my thought of myself, my figure, will be carried over there physically. It will go there and make a form there in that physical place. So supposing I'm thinking of the sea. Let's suppose a beach in Goa where I saw the dolphins. I was on the boat and I saw the dolphins and I was very happy. And I recollect them and I want to see it again. What will happen is my whole body, the form of my body will be transported there. It will be reproduced there. Any clairvoyant, anybody who's sensitive, can see that form there, even though I am not there. But it can be seen there. So this is a second class of thought form. Third class of thought form is when I think of something and in my body that particular form or shape is made. So now this is having a particular concrete form. So supposing I think of this mobile phone. So I close my eyes and I think of this mobile phone. I picture it in my mind. I visualize it. What happens is, in the central part of my mental body, there is a band, just like a TV, but it's all around. And in that band, mental matter of my mental body, it creates this form within my mind. And it gets detached. As soon as it is complete, it gets detached and comes in front of my mental body. And it remains there as a form with a particular shape. And this particular shape remains there. So I am constantly making different types of specific forms which are not generic forms. I am making generic forms as well. For example, if I like this mobile phone and I look at it and I say, wow, what a phone. I really wanted to have this phone. And now finally I have it. So this feeling, the form which is created by this feeling or understanding is a generic form that is created. It is a separate form. But at the same time, I was thinking about this particular form. So this particular form is created in my mind and it gets detached and lies in front of me. This is how I can see it in my mind. So I am creating this third class of thought forms as well. So these are the three types of thought forms that I have created. I will now summarize this a little bit. Whenever a thought is created, it gets radiated all around. The vibrations of that thought, having a frequency of that thought, the nature or the quality of that thought gets radiated depending upon how far it will go, depends upon the amplitude or the strength of the form. And it will impact other people. The second thing is I will make a form. The first was a vibration. The second will be a form. It will be a generic form. It can be targeted, or if it is intended for somebody, it will go to that person. Whether I wanted or did not want, whether I was consciously doing it or not doing it, doesn't matter. It will go to that person. If it is not about some person, but about myself, then that thought form will be created, generic thought form, and it will remain in my vicinity of my mind. And the third subclass is when it will be not directed towards somebody, but a waveform not specified for somebody, it will remain where it was created and be dropped there. The second class of thought form is when I think of myself being in a particular place, then my form will be created in that place. And the third class is when I think specifically of something and visualize, or even if I don't visualize, the form will be created, and that form will be specific. So supposing there's a mouse, so the mouse will be created in my mind when I think about it, and it will remain there, detached slightly away from my mind, and remain there in the vicinity of my mind. So this is the structure of mind. We have to understand this so that we can, we are now in the position a little bit more. We have to understand a little bit about the color as well. Now the color of the form, especially the generic form, it denotes the quality of the form. So as we saw, the bluish form denotes religious feeling. Yellowish color, it denotes intellectualism, or let's say thinking, some scientific thinking, philosophical thinking, intellectual one. If it is rose red, reddish color, it is affection. If it is violet color, it is spirituality. If it is gray, brown, it is selfishness. If it is black, then it is malice. So like these colors, they are produced, and these colors can be seen by clairvoyants within our bodies and without our bodies, as you said. So a mind of a person or a mental body of a person is having all these colors, and I would like to, most of us, we have seen this in our books, but for the people who have not seen, I would like them to see from man, visible and invisible. We can see the physical form within, and all around the whole ovoid shape is the mental body. And different colors, they denote different types of constant emotions and thoughts within the mind. So a person who can see this, if there is a large amount of violet color, and the violet color being of very fine frequency, then that color will be seen in the top part of the person, and that will denote high spirituality. If the lot of orangish color is seen, that shows ambition. If we see a lot of dark brown color, that shows intense selfishness. If we see a lot of brownish gray color, hard brown color, then there is depression. So many things are seen and they have been described. So this was just to let us know. This is how, if we had the sight, clairvoyant sight, this is how we would see the mind. Now, so the quality of the thought, it gets represented in color. Like I just said, affection, devotion, spirituality, you have ambition, jealousy, hatred, anger, so many things. But there are certain qualities which are not shown as color, like loyalty, courage, joy, truthfulness. These are not depicted by any color. They are seen by the people who can see by the shape and the structure of the mind itself. The outline, the various striations within the mind, they depict all these things. So a person with strong will have a sharp outline of the mental body. A person with courage, truthfulness, will have striations in the mental body which will be very smooth, clear, and we can see this very nicely if we have the sight to see. So this is how they have described the mind as a separate entity, and the nature of the thought, it depends. So we have seen now this thing, and we'll go further. I think a lot of time has been spent on this. Two things about the thoughts are very important. One is the clarity of the thought, and the second is the strength of the thought. The more our thought is clear, the more accurate it is. Just like when we speak, the more our words are clear, the more they can be understood. The strength gives the reach of the thought, the depth of the thought, the impact of the thought. The more stronger our sound is, the more farther it will go, the more impact it will have. So both are important when we consider the power and use of thought, clarity as well as the strength. Now we understand that if we want to develop power, I can say now more or less I have finished with the structure of thought and how we can use it. Then the second part that we have to understand is how to develop power in our thoughts. To develop power, we must first of all take care of the loss of power. Just like if we want to transport water from one place in a vessel to another place, but if that vessel is having a lot of holes, we will find that by the time we reach to the second place, the place where we wanted to carry the water to, a lot of water has leaked. So the impact of the thought or our mind will not have enough power to have an impactful thought. So to create that power, we have to stop the leakages. And for that, the most important, or let me say, the most important leakages, in brief, I will say because there is little time, is number one, worry. When we keep on worrying, the forces within the mind, the thoughts within the mind, they keep on churning in one place. It's like we are, instead of marching and moving, we are just moving up and down. Our legs are moving up and down. We are spending a lot of energy without going anywhere. When we worry, we keep on repeating the same thoughts again and again and again and think that something will come out of it. And we spend and we waste a lot of time and energy in this. So worry has to be eliminated by the theosophical student, especially by that person who wants to develop thought power, who wants to become a beneficial force, who wants to become a student of a master of the wisdom. Worry has to be eliminated. And what has been suggested is that if we understand the laws of nature, if we understand that whatever we can do, we do, and let the laws of nature take care, and whatever has to happen will happen. Our only work is to do what we can do. A lot of worry gets eliminated. I will not elaborate on this. Please, you have to find out yourself, do some research for your own self, how you can eliminate worry, because people at different stages of evolution will find different answers to this problem. But important point is, worry is something which leaks a lot of power of our mind. The second is irritation, hypersensitivity. Somebody says or indicates that he is saying or insinuates something or hints at something, we feel very bad. How dare he say something like this? How dare he hint like this? What does he think about himself? And we keep on again making it very big in our mind and lose a lot of energy in that. It doesn't matter what the other person is thinking or saying. That is that person's business, not my business. I have to be clear in my mind what my life's goals are, how I have to go about it. The third is unnecessary argument. So if we do a lot of argument, which is not required, that is why CW literature says unnecessary argument. There might be a situation in which you have to tell the other person your side, the right side, as you think it is right, make it clear to the other person, and that should be the end of it. The other person agrees or disagrees, it should not matter. But in most of us, our habit is that we want to ensure that the other person agrees with us. Therefore, we keep on arguing with the other person to convince the other person that I am right. And this can happen actually physically, but a lot of the time it happens within the mind itself. That when I meet that person, I'll say like this, or I should have said like this. All this is useless waste of time and money and power and everything. So we have to take care of these leakages. The second thing is wastage or misuse of power when we do a lot of gossip. Gossip is already spoken about at the feet of the master. What is gossip? If we see in the physical sense, if I write a letter that look, Krishna Das, how stupid he is, in front of a photo, he is doing salutations, pranams, begging, what a stupid person. Or look, this person. So I make up a story, I see something, I write it down and I post it to 50 people. In my mind, this is what I'm doing. I gossip and tell others, look how and what that other person is doing. So what happens is that I'm spreading a lot of thoughts which are not good, they're evil, and wasting a lot of my power. I'm spreading negativity as well as wasting a lot of my power in unfruitful work, rather evil work. So what happens is that this gossip is a creator of a lot of bad karma, not only for myself, but for others. It's like a virus. I have an infection and I pass it on to 50 other people. Those 50 other people also pass it on individually to 50 other people. You see on WhatsApp what is happening. I get a message. I find, oh, that person is doing, my neighbor is doing like this, and I send it to other people. The other people also do this, and it keeps on circulating. So, since we have seen the structure of thought, what we are doing in the mental world, we are creating a huge amount of negative thoughts. Individually, I might have created only a few, 20, 30, 50 thoughts of one type. But the impact of that is immense. So gossip has to be eliminated because it is misuse and wastage of thought power. Anger and other negative emotions are similar to that, and they have to be eliminated as well if we want to develop thought power. Then negative emotions have to be eliminated. It's negative emotion like anger is like suddenly you lose a lot of power in one direction. Then you feel depleted. Although you may feel a lot of energy, but really at the mental level, you are not useless to do any work. To the clairvoyant side, as C.W. Leadbeater says, an angry thought or a huge negative emotion is like a hurricane, a cyclone within the astral body. It disturbs it so much that the person for the next 24 to 48 hours is unable to do any kind of fruitful work because of this massive surge in a type of vibration in which other types of vibrations, to introduce other types of vibrations to do some beneficial work, it becomes difficult. So we have to eliminate anger and other type of emotions which are negative. The third is we have to eliminate recollection. Now these two are like anger and other negative emotions and gossip. They can be introduced or they can be propagated from outside. We hear something, we see something, we are told something. They can be propagated and we then propagate them, we then spread them. But there are certain things which happen within us, and those are the recollections of those past happenings, the memory part. We remember certainly that some time, let's say 3 years back, some person spoke to me like that. How dare he speak like that to me? So I keep on now elaborating on that thought. So this is misuse of memory, wrong memory. We remember that Patanjali talks about right memory. A yogi should have right memory. Lord Buddha talks about right memory. Patanjali in Yoga Sutra 20 of the Samadhi Path, he talks about that the person should have right memory. A memory which will help the sadhak in his pursuit of yoga. These kind of memories, they will only keep us back. They will not let us go further. They will reduce our power. So misuse of power and wastage of power by having wrong memory, recollection of wrong things, negative things, things which do not have any impact now, which are not a part of our travel plans, where we want to go, they should be eliminated. And then we come to unstructured thinking. We waste a lot of time by keeping the mind idle. So it keeps on going. It's like our horse or like our car, our scooter, our motorcycle. It has its own mind and it keeps on moving around. So supposing if I have a vehicle, I have a car, and the car, I get out of the car, I'm not using the car on itself goes out on the streets and moves around. So it is going to waste a lot of fuel. So our mind, if it is sitting idle and it is just carrying on with some thought or the other, then we are actually not using the mind, misusing the mind, wasting the power. Unstructured thinking has to be eliminated. What can we do? We have to take up positive thoughts about our, we have been given in theosophical literature a lot of suggestions on this. We can keep good thoughts in the background, bring them when the mind is not being used. We can take help of mantras. So when our mind is not engrossed in something, we are not actively thinking, we can use the mantras. So many things that we have to find our own way, which is best for us. Or we can have multiple ways. The important point is that we should not have unstructured thinking. The mind should not be left idle on its own. So in this, I will have to speed it up. It's 9:54. Then we go on to how do we increase the power of the mind. So in this, Annie Besant has said we must do one thing at a time, concentrate fully on that one thing, and do with all our might. When we do this, we build up our mental body, our mind. On this, she has written in her book, Thought Power, and I will read it. We would have mental bodies which should be strong, well vitalized, active, able to grasp the loftier thoughts presented to us. Then we must steadily work at right thinking, for we are our own builders and fashion our minds for ourselves. We should read less and think more if we would have our minds grow and our intelligence develop. If we are in earnest in the culture of our minds, we should daily spend an hour in the study of some serious and weighty book, and reading for 5 minutes, we should think for 10, and so on through the hour. She goes on and says further, with regular and persistent but not excessive exercise, just like when we exercise our body, we should not go to the other extreme of exercising too much. It should be done in a way which is regular and persistent. The thought power will grow as the muscle power grows. And as this thought power grows, it also comes under control and can be directed to definite ends. The mental body will remain loosely formed and unorganized. And without gaining concentration, the power of fixing the thought on a definite point, thought power, cannot be exercised at all. So what we find is that she says that in summary, concentrate on one thing, do it with all your might, develop the ability to think, and how we do it? By taking up a thought and developing it. So when we read the easiest part that she said, when we read something, the author has given some ideas to us. Those ideas we should churn and ponder over, chintan manan, in our minds, and try to understand what the author is meaning, or the different aspects of idea. Our mind grows. Our mind grows when we think of positive things, positive emotions we have, then we gather in our mind material of similar nature, and we eliminate from our mind material of the nature which cannot vibrate in the same frequency as the positive thought. So in the mental body, in the astral body, when we accumulate a lot of matter having frequency of good thoughts, elevating thoughts, elevated emotions, then the negative part of our mind, of our astral and mental bodies, they are unable to match with the frequency of those elevated thoughts, and they slowly start disintegrating and they get dropped away from our. This is the way in which we purify our minds and make the mind strong. So this is one thing that we have to do. Concentrate on one thing, do it with all our mind. And the third thing is we have to be the master of our mind by giving the mind what it needs to think. Not that the mind will think on its own and we will take up that thought and think it over. We decide what we want to think. We are the ones who will give the subject to the mind and what the mind has to think. We are the deciders. I will decide, not the mind, what needs to be thought about. So, fourth thing is, I will live a disciplined life, a principled life. So I determine my principles, how I want to live my life. I can take help of Buddha's Panchsheel. I can take help of Patanjali's Yama and Niyam. I can take ethics and morality or whatever principles I want to have, but they should be of my own making. I should have thought them over. I should have made, yes, I will live my life in this way, and my mind will think in this way. I will not violate these principles because I have decided to work and follow them. So this is how we increase the power of the mind. And the last thing in increasing the power of the mind, especially for Theosophical students, is that daily, and I am saying again, daily, we should practice focusing on the master. We can call it meditating on the master. We choose a master, we select a master, that Mahatma, and we daily, for whatever time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, whatever time you want to have, and you send good thoughts, you have elevated thoughts, you have reverential thoughts. You know, we have 3 stages in devotion. First is respect, second is reverence, and the third is worship. So depending on who's where, we can have devotional thoughts for the master. So as we develop this relationship with the master, the important thing is we're developing a relationship with the master. A link is made between the master's mind and our mind, between the master's astral body and our body. This has been described by C.W. Literature. This is an active link, a channel of communication. It's like we have found a way to communicate with the master wirelessly. And we are, although we may not feel and be able to see and respond and know that the master responded, but if we are confident about this, our study of the structure of the thought and everything, then we are sure that the master and we are having, and I are having a communication. This communication daily, as it is strengthened, will help in increasing our thought power, will help in stabilizing the mind. It will help in improving our ability to help others. The disciples of the master, they are given a particular ability that they can bless other people in the name of the master. So when they say, may the master bless you, then actual blessings from the master, they flow through that disciple to the other person. So they are tapping onto a higher power. So in this way, if we do this, though we may not be accepted disciples as yet of the master, yet still we can tap this power. And this is one of the ways, a very important way for the theosophical student who understands this, to make use and increase the power of the mind, thought power. We also understand that clarity of the thought is important in having an impact. But at the same time, the energy of the thought, it comes from emotion. So when I have an aspiration to help somebody, and it is an emotion, a feeling of goodwill. You know, in affection also, there are three stages. There is a feeling of goodwill, then there is friendship, and then there is love. So I have this feeling of affection, goodwill. This creates the energy in the thought. And when I direct it, that form gets directed towards the person, it goes towards that person. So this energy is given by the disciple. So both the aspects are important. And we should not, supposing I were just to say, oh, may you get healed. There is no power in this affirmation or wish. It has no energy in it. It is like it's like you know, it's like I'm telling somebody, please do this. That person doesn't even listen to me. It has nothing in my power. My sound has nothing in this. My voice has no power in it. So to make it powerful, energy has to be given to it, and it comes from positive emotion. With this, I briefly close the part of the power, building up of the power. Now we go on to the use. And as we all know as students of theosophy, that helpful thoughts have to be generated and directed towards people. The goal is to use thought power to help and elevate other people. All the people that we meet and all the people that we have in our mind to help, we have to use this thought power, and that is the goal of developing this thought power. So when we develop this thought power and we have a particular person in mind, so we have a single person to whom we can send this thought. It is a helpful thought. If that person is diseased, we help him to come out of the disease. If the person is facing difficulty in life, we help that person in trying to come out of. Just like physically we help a person, in the same way at the mental level we help the person. And the more powerful our thoughts are, the more help we can give, provided we do it in the right way. So we give helpful thoughts, thoughts of courage, of health, of protection, of confidence. So many, I mean, there are so many. We have so many instances in which we can help. The second is we give it to a group of people. The first is we give it to a single person. The second is we give it to a group of people. We are living in groups. Man is a social animal. We are all living in groups. We have a group of a family. We have a group of where we live, a community. We have a group of a city. We have so many groups. So we can send thoughts to a group also. Then we have the world at large. So the third part is we can. So in this way we can divide. The important thing is that daily we should take out some time and devote this time to sending thoughts of helpful nature in all the three groups, to single people, single individuals that we have targeted, to people in groups, and to the world at large. Finally, when we are moving in life and doing nothing, our minds are not engaged. Like C.W. Leadbeater says, when we are walking, we are traveling in a train, when we are not using our time in some particular way, then whosoever we see, we can send a thought immediately to that person. So as we are walking down the street, when we see people, we can send good thoughts in their direction. If we see somebody who's, in our country, a person is pulling a rickshaw or doing some heavy manual work, we can send good thoughts of strength to that person. So we have so many opportunities of doing good work. C.W. Leadbeater says, a person who wants to do this work will find ample opportunity. There is no dearth of opportunity, but the inclination should be there to do it. So finally, at the close of this, I had to hurriedly go through this. So at the end of it, I will end by the words of C.W. Leadbeater as he is given in his book, The Use and Power of Thought. It's a very nice book. And the last paragraph that he has written is, by steady, regular practice, great good will be done. For we again strengthen by using it. And so while we are developing our own powers and ensuring our progress, the world will be helped by our kindly efforts. I remember seeing in an American book on mind cure a passage which illustrates exceedingly well what should be the theosophical attitude with regard to the duties and associations of daily life. So the quotation is like this: need love into the bread you bake. When women, they take the flour and they atta gunte hain, so need love into the bread you bake. So a woman who is making bread, who is just kneading the flour, she can send love into that. Wrap strength and courage in the parcel which you tie for the woman with a weary face. So you are a shopkeeper, you are, in a box, you are putting the things which you are giving to that, and the woman is very, whatever. The basic point is, if you see somebody who is a tired face, somebody who needs some strength, is having to feel is weak, you give something with the thought of strength to that person. And the third thing is in this is hand trust and candor with the coin that you pay to the man with the suspicious eyes. So you have a person to whom you have to hand over something. That person is not happy about you, is looking suspiciously. You hand over whatever you're handing, but with trust. You give a trustful thought to that person that, look, I trust you. Though you may think that I am not trustworthy, but I am trusting you. So need love into the bread you bake, wrap strength and courage into the parcel which you tie for the woman with a weary face, hand trust and candor with the coin that you pay to the man with the suspicious eyes. The quotation is closed, and the last paragraph, C.W. Leadbeater says, quaint, strange in expression, but lovely in its thought. Truly, the theosophical concept that every connection is an opportunity, and that everyone whom we meet, even casually, is a person to be helped. Thus, the student of good law goes through life distributing blessings on all about him, doing good unobtrusively everywhere, though often the recipients of the blessing and help may have no idea whence it comes. Never forget that in such benefactions, every man can take his share, and every man take his share. All who can think can send out kindly, helpful thoughts, and no such thought has ever failed. I forgot to say one thing, that in the thought power part, if we are confident, if we actually believe, the more we believe, the more confident we are that our thought will have an impact, the more powerful it will be. So he says, no such thought has ever failed. or can ever fail. We may not always see the result, but the result is there. And we know not what fruit may spring from the tiny seed which we sow in passing along our path of peace and love. So thank you, friends, for patient listening. Thank you, Brother Taneja, for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.